On today's World Insight, China's top diplomat Wang Yi does the rounds in Southeast Asia with a stop at the G20 in Bali. Has the G20 lived up to expectations? How does China's multilateral efforts in the G20 make a difference?
Developing countries, emerging economies are increasingly playing an important role, not only in shaping the agenda for global governance, but more importantly, I think, making the difference, change the game for that.
Hello, I'm Tian Wei, and welcome to World Insight. The G20 Foreign Ministers meeting took place earlier this month, with the global food and energy crisis topping the agenda. But geopolitical tensions over Russia and Ukraine conflict also complicated the G20 discussions. Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi did call for upholding the multilateralism within the G20. So how to see the significance of discussions taking place on the platform? Let's loop in our panelists from the region. Now I'm joined by a very strong panel from the region. In Yogyakarta, Dr. Nur Rashmat Julian Toro, who is an associate professor from the International Relations Department from the University of Gadjah Mada in Indonesia. I hope I pronounced everybody's name right together with your association. In New Delhi, Dr. Avinash Anil Godbole, who is an associate professor and associate academic dean at JSLH. In Kuala Lumpur, Dr. Azmi Hassan, geostrategist and also senior fellow from the Academy of Strategic Research with NASR. In Beijing, Rong Ying, vice president of the CIIS, China Institute for International Studies. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. I want to start by asking questions related to the G20. Now, the G20 this time is further complicated by many things, including the crisis that's going on in the world, as well as geopolitics. Mr. Julian Toro, tell me more about your assessment of how Indonesia has been doing as the host of the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting, and also the result of the discussions taking place.
As we know that last week, Indonesia was the host of the G20 Foreign Minister meetings, and there are a lot of results discussion from that meeting. I understand that a lot of issues has been discussed, especially between the foreign ministers of the United States and China, as well as the foreign ministers of China and Indonesia. Yes, and I also see that the results of the meeting is very, very influential, is very, very important for the upcoming November meeting of the Head of State Summit.
I know Indonesia has been putting a lot of effort into making sure every member of the G20 joined the discussion on the same platform at the same time. I'm sure you're proud of that.
Yes. It is one of the important mission for Indonesia as the current president of the G20 to make sure that every member of G20 can attend the meeting without any limitation. That is why I understand that is why our President Joko Widodo he visited Ukraine and Russia recently in order to make sure that every members of G20 understand the importance of having all members together in the meeting, not only in the foreign minister, but also in the head of state meeting. So the G20 can discuss a lot of important issues, including, even though it is not an economic issues, but including also the situation in Ukraine.
Avinash, all of the guests we invite today are coming from emerging and developing countries. I think this is a very encouraging sign of real direct interactions among all of us. Having said that, though, G20 is a platform mainly for economic and financial issues. That's was the goal after, right at the very beginning of founding of G20 after the global financial crisis. So how do you see the roles of G20 today with the ever more complicated geopolitics going on?
Absolutely important, actually. One of the biggest economic crisis that we have right now is right in our neighborhood in Sri Lanka. And the recent reports have also suggested that the president has fled the country and has gone to Maldives. So G20 has even more on the plate, and I hope Sri Lanka was discussed in the meeting in Bali. Actually, we need a collective solution for a problem like Sri Lanka, and we are facing a humanitarian crisis if we do not have a clear solution to that problem. Having said that, the Russian invasion of Ukraine cannot be ignored, and it has caused the difficult problem around the world. The food prices are quite high. Inflation is taking away the benefits of development around the world, including in India. Inflation was quite high in the recent times. And food shortage next year and the year after that is a bigger problem. So yeah, G20 has a lot on the plate, and it's going to matter for all of us, no matter which part of the world we come from, whether developed or developing.
Yeah. Not every developing country is being represented at the G20. Of course, it's only a multilateral platform so far of 20 members. And of course, there are observers. Having said that, though, Azim, tell me more about how do you see the G20 discussion this time is going to have an impact on the real interactions among the developing and emerging economies right now at this very critical time, likely to be much more challenges ahead economically, financially for the developing world?
Yeah, Tian, I think G20 and especially Bapak President Jokowi is facing a real huge task, not so much on economics matters, but on the geopolitical matters, what's happening in Ukraine, for example. And I'm quite intrigued by Councilor Wang Yi when he was in Jakarta a few days ago. He said that ASEAN shouldn't be used as a pawn in a chess game. And ASEAN, I think there are emerging countries, there are developing countries inside the 10-nation ASEAN, and I'm really hoping that G20 this year in Bali will discuss the importance of these emerging and developing nations. And for example, Tian, I think RCEP is a very good example where advanced countries, developed nations work together with the emerging nations and also the developing nation. I think G20 should take a leaf from the success of RCEP, Tian.
Ying from Beijing, tell me more about your thoughts. Now, everyone in our panel have already suggested the important roles of G20, and the Leaders Summit, of course, is coming later this year. How do you see, with the results of discussion this time and the ever more complex situation that we are likely to experience in the next few months leading up to the leaders' meeting, that the G20 members and developing countries in the G20 representing other members in the world will be able to set the agenda right?
Developing countries, emerging economies are increasingly playing an important role, not only in shaping the agenda for global governance, but more importantly, I think making the difference, change the game for that. Because the very purpose of this organization of the G20 is the recognition that G7 developed countries will not be able to address the challenges facing the world. That was exactly the reason when I think countries in Canada, United States, developed countries, they thought that they should bring on board developing countries. Now, as the crises are rising, become more complicated, we increasingly feel that the role, the leadership is exercising by developing countries, by emerging. And as we have seen what is doing by Indonesia, certainly we have expectations. more importantly, I think the next, we are, as the Chinese said, we are now entering an Asian moment for global governance. Next year, the India is taking over, and the year after next, it will be the turn of Brazil, and then afterward, it will be South Africa. So we have, certainly we can expect, and we're going to see developing countries, emerging economies are playing a more and more important role in not only pushing the agenda, shaping the agenda, more importantly to implement the initiative.
Talking about the agenda, of course, economic recovery after the pandemic, and also correlation and cooperation about prevention, control, health, and many other things are on the agenda for the G20. Now, the developing countries, even though playing a huge role in our world's economy today, still has a limited role in terms of making sure the voices are being heard in building the structures of global governance, particularly now with the complex changes going on. How do you see the roles that developing countries can play, and also the importance of bringing forward and working together in concerted efforts to make sure ideas are being adopted? Azmi, please.
I agree, concur with you when you say that developing nations find it very hard to play a critical role, because the help that needed most are the developing nations, the emerging nations, especially after the pandemic. And coincidentally, Tian, today and yesterday was Councilor Wang Yi official visits to Kuala Lumpur. And one of the discussion with Kuala Lumpur and Beijing is that how cooperation between these two nations can be enhanced after the post-pandemic, for example. I think mutual trust is very important. Beijing trusts KL, and KL also trusts Beijing in this case. So I think beside multilateral strategy, where you need to respect with each other, I think mutual trust is very, very critical here, Tian.
We also see the interesting interactions between the two foreign ministers of Malaysia and China, Azmi, and they were calling each other brothers. Of course, it's very much in the Asian culture that people, especially gentlemen of similar ages, doing that. But to a certain extent, in a very open environment, and be able to address each other in such a sincere way also demonstrates the kind of depths of discussions and trust that is taking place right now, for example, between these two countries. Now, Azmi, tell me more about what do you see could be the two countries' role, since you talk about bilaterally, in trying to making sure ideas like RCEP, ideas like China-ASEAN cooperation could be critical in forming future agendas.
Yes, Tim. Interestingly, when you mentioned the term brothers just now, I think we in Asia understand the connotation, meaning we respect each other. And no doubt that Malaysia considered China as a big brother, and because of China's economic power. But again, when you mention RCEP, I think RCEP is a good example, working together with so-called small brothers in ASEAN and big brothers, China, New Zealand, South Korea, and Japan, for example. And again, I think it's a clear example, RCEP, that when you trust with each other, when you listen to each other, you respect each other, whether you are a big power or whether you are an emerging nation, something good can be achieved, which is a win-win situation. And I agree with you. RCEP is a very, very good example where mutual trust between nations, something good can be achieved, Tian.
Noor, we noticed that in the bilateral discussions between Indonesian and the Chinese foreign ministers, the issue of ASEAN centrality is very much emphasized, and how to build a relationship in the region and bilaterally free from geopolitics and Cold War mentality. It's also being mentioned several times. Noor, tell me more about your thoughts. Why these two foreign ministers, these two countries, putting so much emphasis on making sure these ideas are clarified?
First of all, I would like to stress that China and Indonesia relations has been going very well, especially since President Xi Jinping and President Joko Widodo rise to power in China and Indonesia. And since then, we have built a very strong relations between two countries. That is why we can use this as a foundation for bringing up the issue of development and also strategic issues as well. For example, security in the region, and bring it into the mechanism of ASEAN centrality, as you mentioned before. So ASEAN centrality, I think, is one of the important features of ASEAN that any countries needs to respect, needs to honor. And I understand that China has been playing a huge role in maintaining its relations with members of ASEAN. And in terms of geopolitical issues and also security concerns in the region, we can see that the United States, as the hegemonic power right now, want to make sure that everybody in the region can also play its important role. But this situation also invite other major powers to come into the region. For example, China and also several European countries also come to the region. Then it is very important for all of us to have a mutual trust, as Dr. Azmi said, and also discussion in order to avoid for conflicts, in order to avoid for disagreements that can lead into political turmoil and also security problems in the region.
Avinash, this region, I mean Asia, whether it is Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, or South Asia, we've seen the earlier days of colonialization. We also see the devastating impacts of Cold War. So one could argue people here understand really head to toe about the importance of peace. Now, but the world is not working in that way. Things are much more complicated than they used to be. So how do you think people in this region need to make sure we are not wasting our time, that we will not become the sacrifice of geopolitics, of complex and complicated and chaotic situations once again?
Well, I am an international relations theorist, so I don't think, that we can keep the geopolitics entirely out. But we again believe that rules-based order is not a difficult dream, and it's possible to come together and discuss and create rules that are applicable, useful. India has also consistently insisted, while talking of the ideas like Indo-Pacific, that it does not hurt ASEAN centrality and ASEAN unity. I also have believed in the past that ASEAN centrality has been a product of anxiety of a different era, and we need to find solutions for that. But yeah, inclusive order, rules-based order, and order based on commonly accepted laws, and even laws like UNCLOS, it should be possible to create a peaceful environment in Asia. But again, some of the statements that we have heard calling India's attitude like Cold War mentality and so on does not really go down well with the Indian people as such. So that is also kind of avoidable in my opinion.
Thank you. Ying, it's only natural that every country is taking the opportunity when they come to make their decisions of one sort or another, as long as it is in compliance with our national interests and also, hopefully, the common interest of the future. But Ying, how do you see China's understanding of different positions and also decisions countries in the region are making? How do you see China could be of support of these important decisions that countries and economies are making on their own?
This region, the region we are living, has been enjoyed long-term peace, stability, and prosperity. And the reason for that is we are able to find a way to address these differences in an amicable way. In the meantime, we are also working together to make norms and rules that are being acceptable among us, and through peaceful, consultations based on mutual respect and for the mutual benefit. And more importantly, I think over the past centuries, this region has been developed its own way, we call the Asian way, to address these differences. I think by saying that we should keep out the geopolitical rivalry among major powers, so that this region, all ASEAN countries, should not become the core or the playground for major power rivalry. It's not meant to overlook the reality. Rather, I think China and ASEAN countries are advocating the other powers, be it the United States, Europe, and others, should respect and follow the rules and the principles that we have that have been proved effective and workable to for the region. And that's the, I think, the exact reason why all the countries, major country in particular, should respect and out of sincerity the centrality of ASEAN and respect, I think, Asians' value, Asians' way of managing their differences and promoting cooperation.
Finally, before we go, the value that you mentioned, Mr. Rong, is a very interesting word. We've seen the word of value being used to interpret ideologies, to interpret the commonality, as well as the differences between different cultures and civilizations. Now, the question is, among these countries that are within the G20 platform, and particularly in the Asian region, what is the common value, if we use that word? What is the common understanding that we can build upon together to advance many of the causes you all talk about? Let's go to Avinash first. Very briefly from everyone, I hope, this round. Thank you.
Peaceful resolution of disputes, adherence to previously agreed norms and processes, and building trust. I think we have to go back on that. And again, I will start with the India-China relations as an example. Development is a priority, but peace is also one of the necessities.
I see. Azmi, please.
Yeah, talking about common value, Tian, I think you, as your previous question before this about sacrificial lambs, ASEAN don't want to be sacrificed in this term. And we understand the superpowers between China and United States, and ASEAN want to work together because ASEAN need both China and United States. I think that's the best common value that I can see using the G20 platform, Tian.
Thank you. And also, Noor, please.
Yes, that will be friendship and also mutual respect from countries. Because without friendship and without mutual respect, we cannot develop. And if we cannot develop, then we cannot resolve any issues in global problems.
Ying, finally and briefly, please.
Yeah, I think that, of course, the Chinese side has advocated a kind of common value for for mankind, featuring peace, development, democracy, inclusiveness, and a lot of things. I think for Asia, the topic of Asian values can be very interesting and also, I think, debatable. But we do share some sort of things, something that I think we all feel very comfortable. All of us, pay respect, attach importance to the importance of family and harmony. And also, as we have said, we talked about, discussed that we would like to address and solve our differences in amicable ways, and so on and so forth. And also, of course, we also hope for peace and development. But I think it will take much more conversations like that to agree to that.
Thank you so much, Ying, Azmi, Avinash and Noor. Really appreciate that. This is a wonderful discussion. I hope I will have future opportunities to bring all of you gentlemen back onto this platform and discuss once again directly with one another. Really appreciate it. And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for being with us. Bye for now.